MLMs, social media grifting, influencing, and cults all exist because they're naive, oppressed people, period. When there is demand, supply will never cease to exist. This is the principal nature of capitalism, which is the primary power hierarchy that rule humanity. This week, especially, I got a lot of people telling me that capitalism, patriarchy, racism, power hierarchy, and social elegance lessons that I teach online are common sense. Let me tell you that this is not common sense to you, regardless of what your ego wants you to believe. If you were so smart and all of this was just common sense, how come millionaire, billionaire women and men alike are getting ruined by power games every single day? No matter where you arrive, power games are still prevalent. And the chance of you losing is always there. The higher you go up, because the better you are at playing, the more you accomplish, the higher your risks go up too. The people who claim that this stuff is common sense are sitting very close to the ground, very close to being the bottom of the bottom. Oftentimes, these are the people who struggle the most in their private lives. But again, if your body is immobile and stuck in a certain tier in the privilege hierarchy, the only thing that you can move is your mouth when you don't have mobility. For once, let's take a break from reacting from triggers and look at what reality is serving you. Are you telling me that your level of awareness, expertise, and professionalism is better than somebody like Janet Jackson, who at the peak of her career got ruined by CPR? CPR stands for capitalism, patriarchy, and racism, the three man-made power hierarchies that rule humanity. This is what I call intersectional intelligence, the ability to understand systemic oppression and power dynamics to get what you want. And if you don't play by the rules, you also get ruined. If you think you're an exception, well, that's where your end is too. And let's make it clear that below a rock bottom, there's always more rock bottoms. Capitalism is a ruthless, nasty punisher. There's no such thing as gentle parenting and guidance in capitalism. You get serious, punitive consequences if you don't understand the rules and abide to them to some level. If you don't play by the laws of power based on capitalism, patriarchy, and racism, you are inviting self-sabotage and rock bottoms as your life story, one chapter after another. You can't beat systemic oppression with petty tactics. If that were the case, then other people who came before you would have already figured this out. There's no such thing as tricking a rich man or tricking a man with your witchy pussy to get them to pay for you. All of this influencer grifting exists because there are naive people, especially women. The most oppressed group have to pay for everything, and the most oppressed group also fall for the most basic, simplistic grift. The most oppressed group are the ones who gamble, who fall into addiction to try to have some level of hope, living for the moment, hoping that a momentary sense of win or this form of powergasm that you feel would actually translate to real winning in life, which is not true. The most oppressed get sold by the illusion every single moment. And the problem with the most oppressed is that they don't want to break out of the illusion. So then when nothing else works and everything else has failed, you return to social media tarot card reading that tells you money, opportunities are meant for you. You're meant for destiny, for greatness. And there is somebody secretly admiring you, ready to give you the whole world and more that you could have ever asked for. Stop. This is the oppressed good girl mindset and the addiction to struggle. The other form of addiction to struggle is to suddenly start to see that you've been playing the game wrong, that you've been falling into all these traps because you've been naive, and you decide to no longer take bullshit. So you decide to get angry and make that everybody else's business. With anger comes entitlement, not realizing your place in hierarchy, who you need, who are the people that you need to ally with, and make that relationship work in your favor. Too soon, I find people who start to get some sense of agency and power become way too ego driven to shoot themselves in the foot by cutting off the hand that has held them up. This also is a sign of someone who's never really experienced allies and connection in their life. So when you start to get that support, it becomes really uncomfortable. And when you've been conditioned to accept disrespect and be powergasm, be somebody's supply all your life, unwittingly, you have this desire to treat someone else who's making space for you the same way. So then the one's victim becomes the worst perpetrator when given the opportunity. This is why women have a long way to go to free themselves or free ourselves as a whole. That's why you need to stop using the terminology friendship, because that denotes that it's somewhat meant to be stable and long term. No such thing exists. The first thing you notice when you start to level up, make more money, get into leadership positions, thrive in your business is that the people who were once your friends are the first to turn on you or the first to try to humble you given the opportunity. When you level up, you start to not resonate with the people that you were huddling with to cope in oppression. And that is the reality in the journey of the good girl to the bad bitch. Now ask yourself this question: how much longer will you keep coping? How much longer will you watch these, to be honest, weirdest videos on femininity, dating, hypergamy, MLM, sisterhood in business, women supporting women, girl boss, quantum leap spirituality? Not that these things are not real. Okay. It's not that I don't believe in spirituality. The way these powerful spiritual concepts are used are reductive and boil down to simple manipulation for those who are hoping for some kind of magical outcome without having to do anything different themselves, without having to rewire their habits, to shift their paradigms, to look at the world as it is and see people for who they are. Doesn't matter how many tarot cards you flip or how many Saju masters you go to, how many shamans or how many witch spells you order, you're gonna be coping with the same problems over and over again. And that reality that is served is the only evidence to what progress you've made through all of these efforts that you call self-development. Let's just add in a bunch of the books that you read that were written for white men by white men, or men for men, or for white women to privilege white women. Let's add that into the mix. Power does not look the same on you as it does on somebody else. There are some things you can do and say that other people cannot do, and vice versa. More commonly, what other people can say and do does not work on you. And when I say what something works or doesn't work, it's effectiveness, because obviously you're not choosing to self-sabotage. You often think that a way to gain power, or what you think is empowerment, for example, not tolerating bullshit, maybe raising your voice and speaking up without thinking about context of how other people view you, where you stand in the scale of CPR, that often becomes the worst self-sabotage. And when you cannot back down because you decide that from now on you're going to fight for yourself, well, literally you are throwing yourself in a war zone without much protection or ammo, without backup, and expecting to win the war. Yes, being in society is being in a war. Anytime you enter a social circle, whether that's your spiritual community, corporate culture, even dealing with your own family, the fact you entered your family into a war zone. But of course, back then you didn't know better. You were just a baby. But by now, you need to have caught on that the way you've been, the way you are, the way you've been living 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever years of your life isn't going to cut it if you want a different outcome. The good girl to the bad bitch journey is not only about reading books. That's the first step. It's not only about affirmations. Words are important, but your life doesn't change until you start behaving differently. And the more you start practicing true empowerment based on intersectional intelligence, you do not reprogram your habits. Your life results are a reflection of the habits and the everyday choices you have made. Regardless of whether you thought you were making a choice or not, you are making choices inadvertently. Whether you choose to watch this video, feel good or bad or whatever, and scroll away, or you choose to take action by going down to the description below and finding the links to book a call and join our program to train in social elegance and power, is entirely up to you. If you knew much about power, you realize that none of this is common sense, because anti-connection is unnatural for humans. But you can train yourself to will power as your second nature. Thanks for watching. See you in our call. See you in my next video.